Rudy Giuliani, he's in the center of yet another controversy, this time Ukraine. Now, two men who are helping to fund Rudy's efforts to have Joe and Hunter Biden investigated, they've just been arrested today. Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. They were born in the former Soviet Union, now live in the States, and now they are facing campaign finance violations, including allegations, get this, they funneled Russian money into Trump's campaign, and that's not all of it. Here is one of them, posing with the president in the White House last year. Another shot showing both of these guys sitting down with Donnie Jr. at a fundraiser in California. Now, House Democrats, they've just issued subpoenas demanding documents from those two, and they will also want them to testify before Congress. Now, one of the men also went to breakfast with Rudy Giuliani and former Ukrainian envoy Kurt Volker, and they discussed Ukraine and also discussed investigating the Bidens. And get this, both men had lunch with Giuliani at Trump's D.C. hotel just yesterday. They were arrested today at Dulles in D.C. just a few hours later after buying one-way tickets out of the country. Giuliani, he was asked today if he's worried they may flip on him. His response, not, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm completely in no way connected to these two gentlemen. Good luck, he said, when asked if they'd flip. Not the typical, nothing wrong, nothing to see here. Okay. Now, in the meantime, Trump, he's continuing to go after the whistleblower who brought the Ukraine scandal to light. He's already called him a spy, and now he's saying the whistleblower defrauded the American people. He doesn't deserve to be protected as this whistleblower in the president's mind. I mention all this because some far-right activists have actually offered a $50,000 bounty to anyone who will out the guy. And he's rightfully fearing for his safety. Plus, some new reporting is adding some disturbing details to the accounts from that whistleblower. This coming from the Times. Quote, a White House official who listened to the president's July phone call, again, that makes him a first-hand account, this person, he said that that person described it as crazy and frightening and, quote, completely lacking in substance relating to national security. The official was reportedly visibly shaken by what had transpired. Trump administration continued to stonewall the impeachment inquiry, even calling it unconstitutional. Let me translate that. They're saying that Congress does not have the right to investigate the president, but at the same time, they're also trying to block prosecutors and the courts from investigating the president, which means the White House is saying no one can investigate Trump. He is, in their eyes, above the law. The administration even challenging one of the few legal precedents that we have on presidential impeachment. The court case that cleared the way for the Nixon smoking gun tapes to be released to Congress in '74. Those same tapes that led directly to Nixon's resignation. The Trump White House arguing that today's courts, they would let Nixon keep the tape secret. The response from the federal judge who heard that argument, a very dry, wow, okay. Joining us now to discuss all of this, former federal prosecutor Joe Moreno. And Joe, as always, I appreciate you making time for us. But let's start off first with Rudy and his two Russian pals who were bagged today at Dulles. By all accounts, the feds would have liked to have waited a little bit longer, but the fear here of these guys getting on a plane and not coming back and not being able to extradite them was necessary enough that they moved. Tell me what you think between the lines, because apparently there was wiretaps because they knew some of the substance of these conversations, not just the theory of it, but the actual detail. Tell me what you take away from what we know right now and what potentially these two guys could have in terms of really transactional information.
Sure. Richard, I think you've had me on your show enough times to hopefully understand that I'm not into hyperbole, I'm not into exaggeration. I really try to, see each of these issues as they come. But in my view, this was a horrendous day for this administration for a number of reasons. I mean, here you have the House inquiry into whether or not the president improperly squeezed the Ukraine for dirt on Hunter and Joe Biden. And on the other hand, you have these two individuals with high-level contacts who are now accused of funneling $300,000 to a pro-Trump super PAC. And what's the connector? Rudy Giuliani, the president's own lawyer, who has at this point done and we're so far beyond gaffes at this point. The damage that he is doing to his client, the president, is incalculable. I mean, and I can't understand how Rudy could continue to function as an attorney now, because he's a witness to now both the House inquiry and the prosecution against these two individuals. So it is baffling to me to hear people right now say, well, these are two different things and it's not a big deal, and to hear Rudy kind of shrug off his involvement. I think this is a catastrophic day for this administration, and a lot of it is borne by the president's own lawyer.
And the connective tissue, and by the way, the keystone cops of this, I mean, the president not only mentioned, his attorney mentioned by name to the Ukrainian president that Rudy was going to be coming over to negotiate and, in effect, the terms of the deal here. You want your money here? Well, I got my guy coming over there. We'll work it out. We want information on the Bidens, more specifically Hunter Biden. But more specifically to that point, when Rudy Giuliani was asked today specifically if these two Russian guys would flip and the possibility, a normal person, Joe, let alone an attorney representing the president, would have said, I don't even know with any certainty these individuals, let alone any criminality they'd be involved in. Instead, he went all Goodfellas on us and says, good luck that these guys will flip. I mean, I keep waiting for a hidden camera somewhere, somebody to jump out to say, you know, gotcha. But you cannot make this stuff up.
No, and I think that I'll tip my hat to Rudy in one perspective. I think when he goes on cameras, he's largely honest. I mean, he doesn't seem to lie. He does seem to say what's on his mind. And sometimes it comes out like the way you just characterized. So, and I think that's probably legitimately what he's thinking. Like, good luck flipping these guys on me. Meanwhile, the first thing I thought of was, now you have two guys, and there's two others that were also charged in this scheme, with serious campaign finance violations. Of course it's going to be on their minds whether or not they have information that's useful both to federal prosecutors and to the House impeachment investigators against the president, Rudy Giuliani, and others in this administration. So any normal person, much less a lawyer, would be extremely nervous and extremely careful about what he or she says on camera. That's not what we're getting out of America's mayor.
Now, Joe, interestingly, I've had on recently Liz Holtzman and William Weld yesterday, and both of them had roles during Watergate. And they basically said, I can't believe I'm saying this, or I would have said this in my lifetime. But Richard Nixon had more deference to the office of the presidency and understood consequentially what was going on. And in effect, when they, basically, when things were going the other way, they turned over the tapes, whatever else. It is not a three-dimensional chess argument to say what the administration is arguing in no uncertain terms is that there is no body, whether it be Congress or the courts, that can basically hold them to account. The only way that a president, in their view, can ever be removed from office is through the election booth on November every 4 years. Talk about consequentially that we are in a constitutional crisis if there believes there is no check and balance authority to the legislative branch here, and that they don't have to turn over documents if requested by a subpoena, or even testimony even compelled by subpoena. They believe they're above the law. That's a very dangerous argument, and I pray to God the courts don't uphold it.
Well, a couple of things. I'm not quite as seasoned as your former guest in terms of who had firsthand knowledge of Watergate. I'm a little young for that. But what I do know of President Nixon, he had his faults. But I heard someone say recently he was a patriot. He may have had his own issues with how he used his office and abused his office, but he would not have sold this country out. He would not have asked foreign countries, much less foreign enemy countries, for dirt on political opponents and done it brazenly in front of the cameras. He had some degree of respect for our institutions. And like you pointed out, when it came down to it, he chose to resign rather than put the country through a trial. Now, some might say that was to save his own skin. I'll let history be the judge of that. But he bowed out in terms of letting the country heal. And, heal we did eventually from that debacle of Watergate. In terms of kind of where we are otherwise, I mean, the dangerousness, I'd like to avoid the term constitutional crisis. because I hope we don't get to that point. But I mean, look, that's the direction we're going. We have a White House that is absolutely determined to take a scorched earth approach to this impeachment inquiry, or call it whatever you want. It's a legitimate inquiry by the House as to whether or not the president conducted criminal or other improper acts. So it might take the courts, it might take Republicans in the Senate to finally step up and say, you know what, at some point, we've had enough.
Joe, and I got less than a minute, but is it your belief that at the end of the day, we're going to find, we the people, or certainly at least the Senate, they're going to be able to see and hear what is on those actual transcripts, not the amended version, but the actual version that were shifted to that hidden server? Will we hear the testimony and the other documents that have been requested and even subpoenaed? Does the White House, can you conceive of a world here where they basically get to say, no, we'll tell you what you get to see and we'll choose who you get to hear from? At the end, will the courts compel them to turn it over?
I mean, if there's one silver lining to the last few years of what we've seen, is that while this administration has certainly pushed the boundaries of its powers and its privileges and its prerogatives, it has not openly defied the courts. And so I have to hope that if and when the courts intervene, whether it's on the transcripts and whether it's on other documents, whether it's on going back to the Mueller investigation and the grand jury materials that the House is seeking, when the courts do ultimately intervene and they ultimately find in favor of Congress, and I believe that they will, that this White House will eventually accede to the authority of the courts. I have to hope that happens. If it doesn't, then we are in a constitutional crisis, and there's no telling what happens at that point.
Joe Moreno, as always, great job. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Richard. Always a pleasure.
All right, everyone. If impeachment does get through the House and the Dems have the votes there, and it goes to the Senate, you're going to need 20 Republicans who would have to, in effect, cross party lines and vote to impeach to remove the president from office. Is that possible? Is there any scenario where they would break with this president? Well, we spoke with Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and she weighed in on that and more.